Time for a popular request from the comments section this week as we take a look at the history of the little red Autobot who everyone always seems to think is just Bumblebee in different colours. CLIFFJUMPER. The toy that would become the original CLIFFJUMPER was first released in the Japanese toy line Microchange in 1983. The figure transformed into a super-deformed Porsche 924 Turbo sports car, and was imported by Hasbro to become part of the first year of the Transformers toy line in 1984. CLIFFJUMPER was one of the line's small-scale Autobot mini-vehicles, and was released in both red and yellow variants, but pretty much all the marketing made it clear that red was his real colour. CLIFFJUMPER's toy shared engineering with his fellow Autobot Bumblebee. The two toys transformed the same way, but they were otherwise totally different, with Bumblebee turning into a Volkswagen Beetle. But their similarity earned CLIFFJUMPER a reputation among fans as just being a Bumblebee recolor, a popular but incorrect view of the character that would hang over him in years to come. While developing a profile for CLIFFJUMPER, Marvel Comics writer Bob Budiansky initially named him Blowout before changing it. He was characterized as a speedy and daring little warrior who really hated Decepticons, and was always so eager to wade into battle that he sometimes bit off more than he could chew. His signature weapon was his glass gas, which could make metal as brittle as glass. Writing this profile was about all Budiansky ever did with CLIFFJUMPER though, as the character never got to do very much in the Marvel comic itself, beyond dousing the Decepticon jets with glass gas in the first issue. CLIFFJUMPER enjoyed a larger role in the Transformers animated series, appearing semi-regularly throughout the show's first two seasons, voiced by actor Casey Kasem.
Look at Megatron. I'm gonna blast that smile off his faceplate.
He played a memorable part in the series' pilot episode, working with Hound to locate the Decepticons soon after the Transformers' awakening on Earth. And he shared the spotlight with Mirage in Traitor, a showcase episode for the pair in which a series of unfortunate coincidences and misunderstandings wrongly convinced CLIFFJUMPER that Mirage was secretly working for the Decepticons. This episode presented CLIFFJUMPER as surly, short-tempered, and quick to suspicion, something he wasn't in the rest of the series. But as one of his biggest roles, it proved very influential on the popular perception of his character, and later series have often depicted CLIFFJUMPER with these traits. CLIFFJUMPER's toy was discontinued in 1986, which led to him being phased out of both the comic and the cartoon. In the comic, he was one of several Autobots knocked offline by a Decepticon-controlled copy of Optimus Prime. In stories exclusive to the United Kingdom's version of the comic, he had a different fate, taken out by the Decepticons while searching for the rogue Dinobots. In animation, he took his final bow in The Transformers the Movie, in which he and Jazz were consumed along with Cybertron's first moon by the monster planet Unicron. He was rescued from within Unicron during the film's climax, but he didn't make any further appearances in the cartoon afterwards. It wasn't until the early 2000s that CLIFFJUMPER's name would be heard again, when Hasbro experimented with reusing the name on new, completely different characters unrelated to the original. 2002's Transformers Armada featured a female CLIFFJUMPER, a quiet, withdrawn Minicon scientist who turned into an off-road pickup truck, partnered with the Autobot Cheetor. Armada's 2004 sequel series, Energon, featured its own CLIFFJUMPER, this one a sleek Autobot Dune buggy, characterized as a thrill-seeking stunt driver who loved to take unnecessary risks. As seen in the Energon cartoon, this CLIFFJUMPER served under the elderly Autobot Bulkhead, alongside fellow young warrior Downshift. But this experimentation proved short-lived. In 2006, the original CLIFFJUMPER returned with a new toy in the Transformers Classics line. This figure was a straight recolor of the Classics Bumblebee toy, finally turning CLIFFJUMPER into the B recolor that many people thought he already was. This set Cliff on a track he continues on to this day. He's become the go-to recolor for Bumblebee toys, with virtually every new version of the character being just a recolor of a concurrent bee, maybe getting a new head if he's lucky. After classics came 2007's live-action movie toy line and its various spin-offs and sequels, which featured numerous CLIFFJUMPER recolors of different Bumblebee toys. Then the Transformers animated cartoon in 2008, in which CLIFFJUMPER made a few brief appearances as a member of the Autobot intelligence division on Cybertron.
It was in comic books that CLIFFJUMPER had some of his more notable adventures this decade, with highlights including a starring role in Fun Publications' Shattered Glass series that saw him transported from his world into a mirror universe of evil Autobots and heroic Decepticons, and a self-titled Spotlight one-shot from IDW Publishing, in which he temporarily found peace and escaped from the war after being stranded on an alien planet with a pair of native children. He also enjoyed a significant appearance in 2012's Fall of Cybertron video game, which paid homage to the Transformers the movie by teaming him up with Jazz for a mission to the Sea of Rust. But the series that really helped CLIFFJUMPER stand out as his own unique character for the first time since the original was 2010's Transformers Prime. This series' incarnation of CLIFFJUMPER had an entirely original design, totally separate from Bumblebee, with a muscle car alternate mode. He was a bigger, tougher version of the character, jovial, bantering, and happy-go-lucky, who had befriended the Autobot loner RC when they escaped Decepticon captivity together, and helped to bring her out of her shell. Cliff featured prominently in promotional material for the Prime cartoon, and with movie star Dwayne Johnson cast to perform his voice, the series looked set to be his big moment in the sun.
You want the horns? You got 'em.
So audiences were pretty shocked when it all turned out to be a bait and switch, and CLIFFJUMPER died at the hands of Starscream in the first episode. Worse yet, the Decepticons subsequently experimented on his remains with Dark Energon, briefly resurrecting him as a mindless Terrorcon zombie. His death would haunt RC for the rest of the series, and though his time on the show was short, several figures of him were released in the Prime toy line, including both his regular and zombie forms. CLIFFJUMPER didn't have another major appearance until 2018's Bumblebee movie, a brief role that saw him killed by Decepticons Shatter and Dropkick. Combined with Prime, and an appearance in IDW's Unicron comic book the same year in which he was one of many Transformers killed by the Monster Planet, the film seems to have given him a reputation as a character who dies all the time. But that's not really true. What is true is that despite the strides Prime made, old associations die hard, as the film returned to once again depicting Cliff as sharing a body design with Bumblebee. Transformers media itself has even recently started to make jokes about the character's resemblance, most notably a comedic story in the Transformers Galaxies comic book in 2020, which presented CLIFFJUMPER as having lived his entire life in Bumblebee's shadow, constantly being mistaken for him. The story took CLIFFJUMPER to the planet Probat, where the inhabitants worshipped Bumblebee, until Cliff became their new hero after he saved them from the evil Deathsaurus. Also in 2020, CLIFFJUMPER had a brief cameo in Netflix's War for Cybertron animated series, and got a new toy in the Earthrise toy line. But while the cartoon made him just another red bee, for the first time in years, the toy wasn't a recolor of a pre-existing Bumblebee, but a brand new figure based on CLIFFJUMPER's original Porsche toy, and even came with the giant bazooka he used in the original cartoon's first episode. And later in the year, it would be retooled and recolored to create a new Bumblebee figure instead of the other way around. CLIFFJUMPER and Bumblebee might be inextricably linked, but it looks like there's hope yet that this feisty little Autobot can change his fortunes and make fans realize that he's more than just another recolor. And those are the basics on CLIFFJUMPER. Tell me in the comments which version's your favourite. Don't forget to subscribe and check out over 100 more videos about Transformers history and lore like this one, and get early access to new ones by supporting the show on Patreon.